Welcome, welcome, welcome to a very special Teachers in Business. I am so excited to have my very first friend guest. This is Deb Stanley. I'm so glad to have you with us today, Deb. She is a retired special ed teacher who has been in business. She's going to tell us all the stories, but she's a retired teacher. She's a business owner. She has a business that does a couple of really different interesting things. I think Deb is a really good example of like how to take the skills you had as a teacher and move them in new directions, and sometimes directions that you're like, oh, wait, I'm here. How did I get here? She is also a published author. She's got a whole series of books. She does amazing things. And she's a wonderful resource in her world, in her community, and just for all the people, and y'all should know Deb. So here we are talking to Deb. Thank you so much for coming here with us. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. How exciting is this? I'm always happy to help you with whatever you're doing.
I'm so glad you're here. So let us start at the start. This podcast is really about talking to people who are in the teaching world or who have left the teaching world to be in the business world. But at their core, like I keep thinking of it as like people are teachers. And then when we go into the business world, we put this like little shell over the teacher because the teacher is still in there. There's no taking the teacher out of the human. That's just not how this works. So talk to me a little bit to start about how you, especially now that you've evolved into the business world, how you define teacher and what it really means to you at this point, now that you've been, and we're going to hear a little more about that process in a minute, but now that you've been along this journey for a bit, tell me what your thoughts are there.
When I think of a teacher, for a while, I did think of a teacher under that umbrella of a classroom. And when I first left, I went to a student's open house and I was giving her some advice, I guess, on her next steps. And her grandma said, "You're still teaching." And I think about that because I wasn't teaching her really any skill, but I was encouraging her and inspiring her. And I think that's what we do as teachers. We find the strengths in each student and then we bring them out however we can do that. And so that was an interesting comment that her grandma made right off the bat, like, oh, I am still teaching. And I kind of have lost that, here and there, and have to not separate classroom teacher from teacher. We're always teaching something, whether it's skills or we're encouraging others, or we see those gifts in people that maybe other people don't see, and how to bring that out, how to bring the best out in other people. And that's a critical part of teaching.
Well, and I think you have made that transition now, right? Like it is very much still about bringing out the best in other people. They just aren't necessarily your students anymore, right?
Right. Yes, I have former students who still come to me, but yes, I have new adult students who come to me to learn about purpose, or taking tea, or writing a book, or we're always teaching something. We just don't always think about it as a teacher. It's a natural thing. And I think sometimes when it's a natural part of us, we don't think about it. We don't give it a lot of thought.
Or credit.
Or credit.
Right?
Yes.
And that's the thing that you're like, well, but I'm not doing anything special. But actually, because you have met, like I have met, it makes me think of when I was in the corporate world. I had a boss who I loved, who was a really good dude, without a lick of teacher sense, like none. He'd stand up in front of a group and like halfway through, I'd be like, oh my God, what are we doing? And we would be sharing these presentations, and it'd be like, he'd do half and I'd do half. And slowly, as I got to know him better, and I was like, oh, wow, no, you don't understand what teaching works like, even in a group like this, where it's just like a working with adults kind of presentation. Slowly started as 50-50, and slowly it would be like, you give the introductions, now go sit down. He'd be like, and my part in the show is over, people, see you soon. So tell us what you teach people now and sort of how it relates to where you started. Like pull us down the road some.
Well, I'll start where it started. I was a special education teacher in the school district for about 20 years. And as I taught, I had students who kept graduating and they were just falling through the cracks. They didn't know next steps. And of course, once that IEP, their individual education plan, ends, if they graduate from high school. So if they want a certificate, it's different. But once they graduate, school's done with them and all their resources go with us and the parents' resources. So I was having parents coming to me and students coming to me, former students saying, oh, but I don't know how to bridge that gap between school and life and what comes next. And so I started Transition Bridges and then planted myself in the community as a resource, as a connector, because that's my passion. I love to connect. And I still do that, but it kept evolving. And I eventually, what I really have always wanted to do is write books. And finally I thought, so why am I not writing books? Since I was 11, I've been journaling and writing poetry and talking about writing a book, and I haven't done it. So it evolved into writing books. I wrote a book about purpose. So sometimes people come to me about that now, especially I think I'm older. And so older women, especially, will say, hey, I'm in a new season of retirement. I like to call it refirement, fire up. And what do I do with this time? What do I do with my gifts and skills? Or they think they don't have any. And we do. We all have gifts and skills, and we have skills that people need. So it just keeps evolving. I helped my dad write an autobiography, and now I help other people get their stories into the world because, and actually, I didn't help him. He wrote it on a computer file, and one of my sisters found it, and we made it into a book for him and surprised him. 2019 at Christmas, I flew to Pennsylvania, surprised them all, and we had a family gathering and presented him with this book. And he kept saying, I wrote this.
Oh,
So it was, yeah, it was really special. And it was the last time I saw my dad. I couldn't see him during COVID, and he passed away in August. So there's a picture of him with his book. And not only has family read it, but other people who would never have met my dad have read his story. And it's a very simple autobiography. And it became very important, especially during COVID. My mom said he would sit there and read his book when he was alone, and people in the assisted living facility read it. So they knew my dad more than just somebody who has Parkinson's. He is a person with a history, a very interesting history. So it just became a really phenomenal book. We never could have foreseen that. The minister used it in his celebration of life to talk about my dad, because my dad didn't talk a lot about himself. So we learned a lot. So I'm just encouraging people to get their stories out there now. We just never know the impact that our story will have on someone else. And
well,
so
and I
that's been
think
who.
I it's so interesting that it's like it started as, I think so, like special ed to me are all like, I didn't teach special ed, but I had lots of inclusion kids over the years. Like this was I was always the one they were like, here, come on, get a partner in crime, like let's go. And I was always like, okay, let's go, more teachers, fun. So the special ed teachers for me were always the connectors, as you said, like let me take this kid and this idea and this teacher that gets them, and let me put all these pieces together. And then in Transition Bridges, you connect kids that need the resources to like how to thrive moving forward. And now it's like even transitioned further in connecting people to the ability to express themselves in a way they didn't think they had, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to allow people to tell stories that they have, but they don't know. You're connecting them to process and to resources. It's like the same ball of yarn in a different color, right? Like it's a lot of it's this, and they're all teacher skills, right? Like, so what do you think the teacher skills in all of this are? Like if you had to name a couple that you were like, well, that one I use all the time, and that one I use all the time, and oh yeah, that one, like what's under there?
I think it's still a matter of listening and then meeting a need, whatever that need is. So, like, I might have a former student. I had a former student come to me and say, "Hey, he went to school all on his own and got a certificate to help be a maintenance apartment in apartments." It's like, that's fabulous. And he goes, "But I don't know what's next." So it's still that, like, oh, okay, well, you need to build your resume. And if you have one, you need to update. If you need help, let me know. That's not my skill, but I know who can help you. I put a couple feelers out for him. So, and then other people will come and say, "Hey, I think I would like to write a book like your dad did. Where do I start?" So it's kind of it's using those listening skills that we used all during teaching, observation skills to
Mm.
see what people need and listen to what they need, and then to bridge that gap between what they need and what to do next or where to go next. And we're constantly doing that and encouraging people.
Well, and
We're
I
all,
think it's a lot of, so it's like listening for sure. I think in that, like, observing and listening is that like critical thinking and assessing that comes with teaching, where you're like, oh, wait, you're here. You need to be here. Here's how we get there. Like, I see, oh, okay, now that you said it like this, I see where the breakdown is. And that meeting people where they are, because like what you learn really quickly as a teacher is like everybody's going to come in your room and you have to get them all in the boat. Like you can't be like, sorry, the boat left. That's not, so you have to meet them all. And there are going to be, like, I taught math. So there were kids that walked in that were with the skills and like teaching a college algebra class right now. And there are kids that have walked into my online classroom with the skills. And there was one the other day that asked me what a factor was. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
like that's not a good sign. And she was like, but wait, what's a factor again? Row.
Mhm.
And I think those, but I think being able, you said, people come to you in retirement looking for the next thing and are like, well, I don't have any skills. And I think what happens, I see that in people too. People leave teaching and they come into business and they're like, I don't have any skills. Well, actually, you have all the skills, like
Mhm.
so many of them. And that's identifying them and being able to be like, oh no, look at the skills I used to do this, I think is half that battle, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I absolutely think you're right. I think we segregate things. We kind of talked about that earlier. We separate being a teacher in a classroom from being a teacher in general, and there's not really a lot of separation except you're not in a classroom, but you're using the same skills.
Well, it's like we
So,
climb in the box and we're like, well, but this is the only box I can sit in. This is the one that says teacher on the outside. And you're like,
mhm.
well, actually, there's a way bigger box, or you can just make your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you have done. That's certainly what I do. Like
Mhm.
that's the work I do at this point. Um, Talk to me a little bit about, so I know a lot of your story. I know more than certainly we've done here. I know that you have worked through a ton of small challenges and big ones, all the kinds, like this is what happens in teaching and also in business. Like I remember when I was first teaching and I ran out of corners that first year. I was like, what do I do with the fifth one? Like, uh-oh. So
Oh.
challenges in life, in business, in transitioning, I think particularly, there
Mhm.
are always obstacles and things to overcome. So if you think back, what stands out to you as, the biggest thing you faced and overcome in business so far, and tell it, like, why is that the thing that stands out? What did you do? Tell us the story.
Probably the biggest thing for me is that I wear a lot of hats, like probably a lot of people do, and how to merge all those into a business. And so for a long time, I didn't have any clarity.
Mm.
I thought, well, am I an author? Am I a teacher? Am I a resource person? Am I a connector? Am I a XYZ? And how do all those connect into business? And so I was very unclear about what I was doing. And what really helped me, honestly, was coaching with you, because within a few months, I had more clarity than I had in 6 years. Like, oh, yeah, yeah, you're all of those. And so, and how does that all fit under transition bridges? Well, we're always transitioning. We all have different seasons. We're always looking for ways to get from X to Z, X to Y to Z. I don't know. But those bridges, those connectors, those connecting points, and that's what I help people do. But it took coaching to figure out what that is and then how to let people know what I do.
Mm.
So when I started, I just said I help people with disabilities, and people were like, okay, well, that's wide open. And it's evolved into much more than that, but it takes time. And honestly, if I had to do it over again, I would get a coach right away. Like I may have even stayed teaching one more year just to have a coach to help me transition to business and getting that business mindset. And anyway, that has been my biggest area, my biggest challenge is that
Well,
clarity.
well, and I think that's really interesting because one of the things I know has happened to me, one of the things I see in clients, I know it's what you're talking about, is we go like, well, I am this thing and it is in this silo. And
Mhm.
I am this thing and it is in this silo. And I am this thing and it is in this silo. And never the twain shall meet. Like those things can't touch, the apocalypse will come. But what's interesting to me, and I think I had somebody say it to me, I don't remember when, but it was a couple of years ago when somebody was like, well, but from the outside, we don't see those buildings. And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, but you're just all of you and you do all your things and that's what you do. The only one who sees the walls between them is you. And I was
Mm,
like, oh,
mm.
whoops. Like I can remember thinking like, oh no, like being bowled over with a feather, because that's the thing. And people, I have a client who was doing some visibility coaching and she's a photographer. And at one point she said to me, well, I can't have them on the same website. I was like, well, but they're both yours. And she was like, right, but people will get confused. Like, we're not giving people enough credit when we think that. Like they see all of us. The other people see all of us and all the ways you connect people, all of the ways you have the ability to bridge. It's us that are like, oh wait, but those things can't touch. I can't have corn touch potatoes, touch chicken. Like that's not okay. We need plates with squares.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it takes that outside person to see that, because it's hard to see that in ourselves. And you're absolutely right. Am I an author, or am I a teacher? Am I a transition person? Am I a ABC? Yep.
Well, right. And I think that the online business world in particular is like, well, what's your title?
Hmm.
And you're like, well, it's whatever the idea well want it to be. Thank you very much for playing. That's the joy of this. I get to freaking decide. And it feels like that's not okay. And especially I think
Hmm.
for those of us who have come from a school building in particular, where like there are a lot of rules. And if you were in a middle or high school, there are even bells. Like you pee on a schedule, basically. Like you can't. And so then you go out into the business world and people are like, do you? You're like, whoa, huh?
Who am I? What does that
Like,
even look like?
whoa. So you go shopping for rules and you put in boundaries, and we overdo it because we don't know what else to do. And that's the trick to it, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I
That
think
was one of my biggest frustrations with teaching, was I wanted to do things outside the box, color outside the lines a little bit. And it was, sometimes I could, I created Power Peer Support and did a transition class, created that. But for the most part, it was always, well, we don't do that, or we've never done that. And whenever I got, we've never done that, I'm like, oh, let's do that.
right.
I
And
want to color outside the lines.
well, and in business, when somebody's like, well, that's not how it works, you go, okay, but it is now.
This is
Like,
my world.
right. Like that's sort of the joy of it. Like, honestly, my inner 5-year-old really enjoys the business world, because every time somebody is like, you can't do that like that, I'm like, watch
I'm
me.
gonna do that.
Let's go. I mean,
Mhm.
that happened in corporate at some point. This is really what pushed me out the door, honestly, was there was a higher up in the organization at some point that over email. Like they didn't give me a job I didn't want, honestly, like, 'cause I made my own jobs as I went, but they didn't even consider me for it. And it was like, well, but she can't do that. She's a girl, basically. I
Oh.
mean, when it came down to it, like, she's not capable of that. And I was like,
Hmm.
huh, okay.
Well,
Well,
watch me.
that's interesting. I'm gonna go run circles around you all for the rest of
Uh-huh.
my life. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I was like, oh, okay. That's great. Thanks. Thank you for the
Well,
challenge. Oh
that's
yeah.
what it is. Yeah, it's a
But that's really
challenge.
what shoved me, now that I look at it, that's why I started my first business. That's why I went back. That's part of it. And part of it was because I wanted that and I knew what I wanted. But the other part was like somebody went, no, she's not capable.
Hmm.
Okay. Thanks for playing.
Uh-huh.
So talk to me about, I know one of the things you said is you'd wished you had done coaching at the start.
Mhm.
Are there other things that you think people like, what are the pieces of advice that you've gotten over time that you're like, oh, why didn't you tell me that sooner? And I know we can't always hear it. Sometimes we can't hear it. So somebody did say it earlier and you just couldn't hear it yet. But
Mhm.
like, what are those one or two or three things where you're like, no, 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 here's the thing you should hear now?
The two biggest things I learned even through coaching are clarity and consistency. So if we're having trouble being clear about our business, it is important to find someone who can help us with that clarity. And of course, that was you for me. And then consistency. So being consistent about whatever it is. And that doesn't mean we can't change what we're doing.
Hmm.
And I think that's a rut too, or we've talked about this. Like the next book is going to tell me what to do. The next course is going to tell me what to do. The next, no, it's in here. We just don't see it all the time. And it takes a person sometimes to help us, a coach, to help us see the things we can't see. And
Well,
then it's
we have
my
to.
business. I can do with it what I want. That was huge for me because we do get used to so many rules. And as much as I hated those rules, when I got out and I went, oh, I can do anything. I thought, oh, can I? Yes, I can. And sometimes it's hearing, I still hear your voice. It's your business.
Mm.
You do whatever you want with it. So when I think of changing it a little bit or going in a different direction, like, oh, but that's not transition bridges anymore. Yes, it is. It is. It is.
Yes.
It's my business. I'm the CEO. I can do whatever the heck I want with my business.
Oh my God, I want to like hug you. These are the words I
You're
want to
like,
hear from Deb Stanley. But I think that that's right. And I think, we also get sucked into like how business should look and how other
Mhm,
people do it. And I think, it's like, well, but I'm supposed to be at my desk from 8:30 to 4. And a work day is 8 hours long, and there is an hour for lunch. And my other coaching colleagues each have 20 clients. Therefore, that is what I should do. And it's like, oh, wait, I don't have to do it like that because that's not how my brain works.
mhm,
Oh, like I have a client not too long ago, like we shortened her day. She works better that way. She has less time to mess with. It's
mhm,
better to not have time to like be like, but I'm supposed to be at my desk. Like, and I think the other thing I heard, in consistency is, the thing I think all the time is it can change, but also consistency and regular are not the same thing. And I think we confuse them.
mhm,
Like consistent doesn't mean every day, at 8 a.m. every morning you do this thing. It means you do this thing most of the time when you're ready to do it. Like you get to define what that consistency looks like. So there are things I do 3 times a week. Sometimes they're 3 days in a row, and sometimes they're not.
mhm.
Whoa. But like, how do you want to show up consistently? How do you want to meet new people consistently? How do you want to work on yourself as a CEO consistently? And what does that look like for you? We each get to decide that, which
Mhm.
is like both a blessing and a curse because we're like, oh my God, I get to decide that. Oh God, I have to decide that.
Exactly. There's no outline, there's no guideline, there's no blueprint. I think that was one of the hardest things when I started my own business. Like, what do I do next? Well, there's no blueprint for it. So I've always had a blueprint, most of the time. I mean, parenting, I guess, is a little bit kind of like, "Rrr." But for the most part, you go to school, you get your degree, you start a job, somebody tells you what to do, you show up and you do it. Try to, you might do something a little out of the box, but for the most part, you have to stay within their box, their guidelines. And so all of a sudden when you have freedom, it's like, but where's the blueprint? And there isn't one.
Well, and actually there's not one, but also there's thousands, which I think
Right.
is the trick, right? Because even
Squirrel.
if you go look at the coaching space,
Mhm.
like I was in a mastermind over the winter and there were 28 business owners in there. And I got a little hung up at a certain point because I was looking at like, well, I like that she does it that way. I like that she does it that way. I like that she does it that way. I'll do all those ways. And then I was like, well, I don't like any of these ways. There's something, so there's a million ways to do it. The thing that I find really freeing in a lot of ways is this idea that there's a million ways to do it and there's a million ways it works.
Mhm.
Right? Like the number of ways it doesn't work is finite. Like my math brain really likes the idea that the number of ways to fail, the number of ways to do it where it's not going to work out is like is a number. Like you can do all of those. You can fail all the ways and actually like then succeed because you can run out of ways to fail. But you can't run out of ways to do it well. Like that's infinite. And if you look around, you see there's plenty of people succeeding and doing things in ways that you're like, oh God, no. Like that's how I feel about Instagram. Like, no, thank you. You just don't want to.
Mhm. That's where all the experimenting comes in.
Yes.
And I
So
love that.
what's
Mhm.
your experiment right now?
My experiment right now is helping people with their with their books. I've never done it. I didn't, like I said, I didn't even do my dad's autobiography. I just made it into a book for him. He did the work. So there's a part of my brain's like, well, we've never done that, so you don't know what you're doing. And then but maybe not. But there's only one way to find out, and that's to offer to help. And as I've been offering, I'm like, oh, I'm a writer. I know how to write. I know if something looks good, sounds good, how to tweak it. I know how to do this. So I think that's the other thing. Well, I've never done it, so I can't put myself out there as knowing how to do it. Well,
Well,
we
but you,
can.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's just like, but I think about it in cars. You were like, well, but I don't know how to help somebody write a book. I'll only to help them know how to help them write a 5 paragraph essay. Like you're helping writing versus helping writing. It's like if somebody, and I was telling somebody this yesterday, I drive a minivan. It's a lovely minivan. And
Mhm.
if somebody came on there, were like, here is this Maserati, can you drive it? I wouldn't be like, nope, I only know how to drive a minivan.
Mhm.
I'd be like, thanks for the car. Take my minivan with you.
Woohoo.
Don't
Yep.
let the door hit you. But like we know it's that like what we build as teachers and students is the ability to take a skill and use it in a bunch of places. And then when we look at ourselves, we're like, well, but I can only use that skill over there. I
Mhm.
can't bring it with me. And it works the same for adults, friends. Like it's take it with you. You're qualified. You win. Here's the stamp.
Mhm. We are. And if we don't know how to do something, we ask, or I'm good at knowing who a good resource is to help with that particular thing. Like I said, writing resumes is not my jam. I don't really love to. My daughter helps me if I have to update mine. So if somebody comes to me and that's part of their journey, that hey, I completed the certificate and now I need an updated resume, I point them to someone. So it's okay to
Well,
do that.
but I think actually there's a fine point under there, which is that it's not that you can't, it's that you know you don't want to.
Exactly. I could learn, but my energy is elsewhere right now. And yeah, we
And
choose what we want to learn and get better at. If we don't want
right.
to, we go, I know somebody who's good at that. That's not something I want to spend my time and energy on right now. So you're right.
Well,
I could
yeah.
learn, but I could also design my own covers for my books, but no, thank you. I have Megan and she's phenomenal. If you've seen the covers of my books, she formats, uploads, does all that. And I just can write, which is amazing that I can just write my books and then I send them to her and she designs something and does all the work.
Well, and I think that's a good piece of advice actually underneath there, which is like, there are going to be things in every business that you're like, if I never have to do that again, I will be so excited. It's not that you can't,
Right.
but there are going to be things that you're like, you know what, this isn't a good use of my time. Like at a certain point earlier or late last year, I was doing some rebranding of my group and my podcast and some other things. Could I have made it all? Absolutely. Would it have taken me 100 years? Yes. Do I have a dear friend up the street who is magic at this kind of thing? And it took her like an hour. Yep. And she knows me, she gets me. And she was like, oh, here. I was like, this would have taken me the rest of my life. And it would have been funky looking. And like, I know, can I? Sure. Can I figure it out? Yes. Like, I firmly believe that if tomorrow I decided to be an astronaut, I would figure it out. Like, I don't get in my way, peeps. But at the same time, like, I don't actually want to. So I don't know. Like, you don't want to write resumes. Cool. Don't. No one said that that had to be a part of your jam. Like, you get to decide. We get back to deciding. You get to decide. And if you hate something, don't do it.
Exactly.
Like, yeah. I talked to a potential client the other day and she was telling me about how much she hates being on Facebook. And I was like, so don't be. She was like, I'm sorry, what?
Excuse me.
And I was like, so don't. She was like, well, but I'm supposed to, it's business. Like, where do you want to be? She was like, I really like Instagram and LinkedIn. I was like, cool, do that. She was like, well, she like, couldn't. It was so funny because she was like, well, what? I don't have to. No, do you? Nobody cares.
That's one of the beauty of our own business, right? I mean, we were teaching in a school district. We had to do things that suck the energy right out of us. And now we don't have to. We get to do all the things that energize us and delegate everything else.
But like how, what's the word? I have a coaching colleague that uses this word. It's shoot, I can't grab it. It's like how counter all the programming, right? This idea that you could run a business successfully just built out of the stuff you love. And it actually works better. It's wild. You do not have to sit and bang your head on the table. Like, how much fun is that? And how much more fun is it when you're like, man, I don't want to make the cover here. Person that loves to do this, go do this.
There you go. There are people who love to do what we don't like to do. And there are people who don't like to do what we love to do. That's what makes the world go around, right?
Well, and the things that you love to do most are like hard for the other people. Just like making logos is torture for me. Like, my friend is fabulous at it. Like, I don't have to be good at all the things. I can be great at what I'm great at. You can be great at what you're great at. And I can just do that. And that's so freeing. Okay. So tell me what you, tell me how people get in touch with you. Tell me how people get started with you. Tell me what else you want to share with people, where they find you.
It's easy to get in touch with me. I'm on Facebook under Deb Stanley, or I have a couple other pages. I have Taking Tea with Deb Stanley, which is my books, a few of my books. And I have Transition Bridges with Deb Stanley. So any of those, if you get on and message me, you can find me. And I know you have the link to my main Facebook page. I'm on LinkedIn under Deb Stanley. So I'm willing to, if you even email me, I probably didn't give you you have my email address. So my phone number is at the bottom. You can even call me. I'm not hard to get hold of. And then, I like to just meet with people and chat for 30 to 60 minutes. It doesn't cost anything, and see whatever need you have. And if I can help you with that, I will. If you decide to go with somebody else, that's okay. I love having conversations. So I never feel like you wasted my time. I don't have the bad feelings. I get a lot of energy out of conversation and connection. So you have just energized my day. If you talk to me for 30 to 60 minutes, we're good.
I know. We were just talking about that yesterday
Uh-huh.
in my Facebook group, which people who are listening, if you're not in my Facebook group, come play. You can play with me and Deb. It's called Teachers in Business. But like, it's the idea, I think we all like go to the idea of networking or like connecting with new people and we're like, so exhausting. And then we leave with more energy and we're like, oh, but then we forget again and we go through the whole cycle over and over again. And it's just remembering that people are what energize us. Like really, especially if you're a teacher person, like you are in it for the people. So if you want to get in touch with Deb, please reach out to her. She's amazing in all the ways. She's happy to connect you. She's your bridge to all kinds of places. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me in my Facebook group, which is Teachers in Business. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, which is Torpy Coaching. And if you want to talk coaching, because really it is a difference maker. Like I was talking to a colleague yesterday and we were talking about risk and like the risk of trying coaching is actually smaller than the risk of not trying and not getting where you want to go. Like it's less risky to try the thing than to not try at all, I think, in so many ways, because if we're trying, we're at least learning. And just like with Deb, you can call me and we can have a conversation and like I will love you anyways. Even if you don't want to move forward, like I'm still okay. Come into my world, come play, come learn and get some clarity. And if you want to take it with you and never talk to me again, I will live. I promise. I mean, I'll be sad maybe, but it's okay. And with that, thank you, Deb Stanley. What a treat.
Thank you, Sarah. This is so much fun.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So have a good week, everybody. And I will see you on the next episode of the podcast.